They once lit up the big screen, carried blockbuster films, and had audiences convinced they were here to stay. But Hollywood is ruthless. It builds stars only to shut doors on them without warning. For these black actors, the fall was swift and brutal. One day, they were in demand. The next, it was as if the industry erased their names. Here are 10 black actors Hollywood won't hire anymore. 10. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes once stood at the very top of Hollywood. In the 90s, he was the action star audiences couldn't get enough of. He showed off his range in films like New Jack City, White Men Can't Jump, and Passenger 57, but it was Blade that cemented his place in pop culture. Long before Marvel dominated theaters, Snipes made a black superhero not just believable, but iconic. He should have been enjoying decades of leading roles, yet his career took a sharp turn that proved unforgiving. The biggest blow came when Snipes was convicted of failing to file federal income taxes for several years. In 2008, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison, a punishment that completely derailed his momentum. Studios suddenly saw him as a risk rather than a box office star. Adding to his troubles, reports from the set of Blade Trinity painted him as unprofessional and combative. Word spread quickly in Hollywood, and the reputation of being difficult to work with stuck. When Snipes was released in 2013, the industry had already moved on to fresh faces and new franchises. He managed to land supporting roles in films like The Expendables 3 and Coming to America, but these appearances were reminders of how far he had fallen from his leading man days. For a star who once proved that a black actor could dominate the superhero genre, the reality is stark. Wesley Snipes is now one of those actors Hollywood won't hire anymore. 9. Orlando Brown. Orlando Brown's career began with immense promise. As Eddie Thomas on Disney Channel's That's So Raven, he was funny, likable, and overflowing with talent. Audiences loved his comedic timing and the way he lit up every scene. He seemed destined for a bright future in Hollywood, with the ability to act, rap, and even sing. But what should have been the start of a long career instead turned into a cautionary tale of how quickly it can all unravel. Once the Disney show ended in 2007, Brown's life spiraled into chaos. Headlines no longer focused on his acting roles, but on his repeated arrests. Charges ranged from drug possession and DUI to domestic violence and burglary. His battle with addiction only worsened things, making him unreliable and unstable in the eyes of casting directors. In Hollywood, dependability is everything, and once an actor is seen as a liability, opportunities dry up fast. Brown tried to stage comebacks with small projects, but the stigma followed him everywhere. Each new arrest overshadowed his talent, making it harder to convince producers that he could be trusted. What makes his story especially heartbreaking is that his natural ability was undeniable. He had the energy and skills to become a lasting star, but personal demons derailed it all. Today, Orlando Brown stands as a clear example of a once promising actor Hollywood won't hire anymore. 8. Stacey Dash. Stacey Dash was once the face of cool and confidence. Her breakout role as Dion in the 1995 teen classic Clueless made her a household name. She had beauty, charisma, and the kind of screen presence that could have easily carried her into long-term Hollywood stardom. For a while, she picked up supporting roles in television and smaller films, but she never quite reached the A-list level many thought she deserved. Then, instead of fading quietly, she became a lightning rod for controversy. In 2014, Dash made headlines not for her acting, but for joining Fox News as a political commentator. She voiced strong and often divisive opinions on race, gender, and politics that angered many of her fans. From criticizing President Obama and Beyoncé to suggesting Black History Month shouldn't exist, Dash alienated much of the community that once supported her. Even Fox eventually suspended her for an outburst on live TV. Hollywood, which is famously sensitive about public image, quickly distanced itself. Casting directors were hesitant to attach her to projects that might stir up backlash. Roles dried up, and she went from being a cultural icon of the 90s to a name associated more with controversy than talent. Stacey Dash later admitted regret for some of her comments, but by then, the damage was already done. Her story is a prime example of how quickly Hollywood can turn its back, and why she now sits among the black actors Hollywood won't hire anymore. 7. Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard once looked unstoppable. With powerful performances in films like Hustle and Flow, which earned him an Oscar nomination, and roles in Crash and Iron Man, He was positioned as one of Hollywood's most versatile black actors. He could deliver intensity, charm, and vulnerability, all in the same scene. At one point, it seemed certain he would become a permanent fixture in blockbuster movies. But behind the scenes, things were far less glamorous. Howard's personal life was filled with controversy. Multiple ex-wives accused him of domestic violence, and in interviews, he admitted to incidents that confirmed those troubling reports. For Hollywood, which relies heavily on image and reputation, these revelations painted him as toxic. The trouble didn't stop there. During the Iron Man saga, Howard had a very public fallout with Marvel Studios after disputes about his salary. When he refused to return for the sequel, the role of James Rhodes was recast with Don Cheadle, signaling that studios were ready to move on without him. In later years, Howard sued Fox and his talent agency, claiming financial disputes during his time on the hit series Empire. He also faced issues with unpaid taxes, further tarnishing his public image. Though undeniably talented, his reputation as difficult became too heavy a burden in an industry that values predictability. Once celebrated as a rising star, Terrence Howard's career stalled, and he remains a powerful reminder of how quickly Hollywood shuts its doors. He is firmly on the list of black actors the industry won't hire anymore. 6. Anthony Anderson. Anthony Anderson spent decades building one of the most recognizable careers in comedy. From films like Barbershop and Kangaroo Jack to his unforgettable role as Dre Johnson in the hit sitcom Blackish, Anderson became a household name. His ability to bring humor, warmth, and energy to the screen earned him critical praise, multiple Emmy nominations, and a loyal fan base. For years, it seemed like he could do no wrong, but Hollywood has a short memory when controversy strikes. In 2018, Anderson's reputation took a major hit when he was investigated by the LAPD for sexual assault. Though prosecutors ultimately declined to press charges due to a lack of evidence, the story dominated headlines and cast a shadow over his career. For an actor who had spent years cultivating a family-friendly image, the accusations left a lasting mark, even without a conviction. Since then, Anderson's roles have noticeably shifted. While he hasn't disappeared from the spotlight, the offers of major leading roles have slowed. Instead of headlining sitcoms like Blackish, he's been hosting shows, making guest appearances, and working more behind the scenes. Hosting the Primetime Emmy Awards and a family game show with his mother kept him visible, but it's a far cry from being the face of one of ABC's biggest comedies. Anthony Anderson remains talented and popular, but Hollywood's caution is clear. In an industry that protects its brand above all else, his name is now linked with controversy, making him one of the black actors Hollywood won't hire the same way anymore. 5. Gary Dourdan. Gary Dourdan's story is one of Hollywood's most striking falls from grace. In the early 2000s, he became a household name, playing Warwick Brown on CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, one of the most watched shows on television. With his undeniable charisma and strong screen presence, Dourdan looked like he was destined for long-term success. Fans adored him, and the industry had every reason to believe he could transition into even bigger roles. But the personal battles he faced would end up overshadowing all of that. In 2008, Dourdan was arrested for drug possession, a moment that changed how both fans and Hollywood executives viewed him. Though the charges were eventually dropped, the damage to his reputation was real. Just a few years later, in 2011, he was arrested again, this time for drugs and felony battery after a fight with his girlfriend. Reports claimed he broke her nose, and he was sentenced to probation. The negative publicity grew, making it impossible to ignore. On top of his legal troubles, Dourdan also struggled financially. By 2012, he had filed for bankruptcy, admitting he could no longer keep up with mounting debts. While his exit from CSI was tied to the end of his contract, his personal controversies made it nearly impossible for him to secure big roles afterward. Today, Gary Dourdan works mostly in small independent films and television projects that don't garner mainstream attention. Once a breakout star, he is now a clear example of a black actor Hollywood won't hire anymore. 4. Mo'Nique. Mo'Nique's rise was the kind of Hollywood dream that seemed unstoppable. She started as a stand-up comedian, bringing raw honesty and sharp humor to every stage. Then came her powerhouse performance in Precious, 2009, which earned her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. That win should have launched her into elite stardom, with endless opportunities in both film and television. Instead, it became the start of a long and painful battle with Hollywood itself. After Precious, Monique refused to promote the film at international events without being paid, arguing that unpaid work wasn't in her contract. While she saw it as standing up for herself, powerful names in the industry saw it as defiance. She later accused Lee Daniels, Oprah Winfrey, and Tyler Perry of blackballing her from future projects. Her willingness to speak openly about the unequal treatment of black women in Hollywood made her a symbol of courage to some, but to studios, she became difficult. Her legal battles continued in 2019 when she sued Netflix for offering her far less than other comedians for a stand-up special. Monique called it discrimination based on both race and gender. While many supported her stance, the lawsuit reinforced her reputation as a troublemaker in the eyes of Hollywood executives. Years later, Monique reconciled with Lee Daniels and returned to work with him, sparking hope for a comeback. Still, for more than a decade, she lived as proof that Hollywood doesn't forgive easily. For all her talent, Monique remains one of the black actors Hollywood won't hire anymore. 3. Cuba Gooding Jr. When Cuba Gooding Jr. shouted, "Show me the money," in Jerry Maguire, he wasn't just delivering an iconic line, he was cementing himself as one of Hollywood's brightest stars. His performance won him an Academy Award, and audiences expected him to soar to the top of the industry. For a while, it looked like he would. But the roles that followed didn't live up to his Oscar win, and soon his career began to slip. Then came the scandals that erased almost everything he had built. In 2019, Cuba was arrested after being accused of misconduct in a New York bar. That incident opened the door for more than 20 women to step forward with similar accusations. The headlines were devastating, and his image as a likable star completely crumbled. Though he avoided serious jail time by pleading guilty to a lesser charge, the sheer number of allegations was impossible for Hollywood to ignore. Studios quickly distanced themselves. Even with his immense talent, he became too controversial to attach to major projects. He tried to stay active with smaller films and television appearances, but the momentum he once had never returned. For an actor who once stood at the top, his fall was both steep and permanent. Cuba Gooding Jr. is a reminder that in Hollywood, reputation matters just as much as talent. Once your name is associated with a scandal on such a large scale, doors rarely open again. That's why he remains one of the black actors Hollywood won't hire anymore. 2. Isaiah Washington. Isaiah Washington's career should have reached legendary heights. He was already respected for his film roles, but his breakthrough came as Dr. Preston Burke on Grey's Anatomy. At the time, it was one of the most popular television shows, and Washington's character was central to its success. He had charisma, presence, and a growing fan base. But in 2007, everything changed after an on-set incident that Hollywood has never let him forget. Washington got into a heated argument with co-star Patrick Dempsey, and during the exchange, he used a homophobic slur. Reports later suggested the remark was directed at fellow cast member T.R. Knight, who soon after publicly came out as gay. The controversy exploded when Washington repeated the same slur backstage at the Golden Globes while denying he had ever used it. The backlash was swift, and ABC decided not to renew his contract. The fallout was devastating. Washington went from being a series regular on a top-rated show to struggling for roles. He later admitted the incident cost him almost everything: his agent, his publicist, and his standing in Hollywood. Though he managed a few comebacks, such as appearing on The 100, he never returned to the same level of fame or influence. His talent was never in question, but in the eyes of Hollywood, the scandal defined him. Once at the center of a hit show, Isaiah Washington's career became a cautionary tale, placing him firmly among the black actors Hollywood won't hire anymore. 1. Jussie Smollett. Few Hollywood stories have crashed harder than Jussie Smollett's. As Jamal Lyon on the hit series Empire, he was adored by fans for his acting, singing, and the representation he brought to television. Smollett was not just another star, he was a symbol of progress, a young black actor openly playing a gay character on primetime TV. His future looked limitless. But in 2019, his name became synonymous with scandal after an incident that shocked the world. Smollett reported that he had been the victim of a hate crime in Chicago, claiming he was attacked by two men shouting racist and homophobic slurs. At first, he was met with sympathy and support from across the country. But as police investigated, the story unraveled. Authorities concluded that Smollett had staged the attack, hiring two acquaintances to carry it out in hopes of boosting his career. The revelation turned admiration into outrage. He was charged with filing a false police report, eventually convicted and sentenced to jail time, though his conviction was later overturned on a legal technicality. Still, the damage to his career was irreversible. Empire cut ties with him, and no major studio or network has dared to cast him since. Jussie Smollett went from rising star to one of the most notorious figures in recent Hollywood history. Even with his conviction overturned, the stigma remains, and his career has been left in ruins. His downfall is the clearest example of why he now tops the list of black actors Hollywood won't hire anymore. These 10 actors prove just how fast Hollywood can turn its back. Fame, talent, and even awards weren't enough to protect them. Once scandal, controversy, or personal struggles took center stage. Some tried to rebuild, others disappeared completely, and a few are still fighting to be seen as more than their mistakes. Hollywood has a long history of closing its doors, but sometimes comebacks happen in the most unexpected ways. So here's the big question: which of these stars do you believe deserves another shot at redemption? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button if you enjoyed this deep dive, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from behind the spotlight. Your support helps us keep uncovering the Hollywood truths they don't want you to hear.